I think he'll change. He is committed of his own level of service, and
privileged to bear during so much of my life and duty.
Queen for a very long time. And although you kind of know that this might happen.
State banquets, the request had already been prepared. The inventory had been reviewed, and Queen Camilla believed only one final approval stood between her and one of the most emotionally significant jewelry collections in royal history. But when the papers reached Princess Anne, the expected signature never came. Instead, the king's sister closed the file, looked directly at the waiting palace official, and delivered a decision that instantly transformed a private inheritance dispute into a royal power struggle. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Anne sat in silence with the transfer file open before her. The Royal Estate Committee, a family body overseeing private royal property, had been asked to approve Camilla's bid for custodial control of the Queen Mother's jewelry collection. That meant control over storage, loans, public display, and future assignment. It was not a request to borrow one necklace. It was a request to shape the collection's future. The princess read every clause twice. Then she removed her glasses, placed them beside the final page, and looked at the official across from her. "This collection does not move," she said. The decision was quietly absolute. Anne had formally blocked the transfer, and everyone understood why it mattered. These were not ordinary jewels. They included historic tiaras, brooches, necklaces, and personal pieces tied to Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, the late matriarch, whose memory still carried force inside the family. Camilla first assumed the delay was procedural. She asked her aide whether another signature was missing and waited for reassurance. None came. The aide explained that Anne had rejected the bid herself. Confusion hardened into humiliation. The Queen Consort had believed the request would confirm her authority. Instead, it exposed the limits of that authority personally. Anne knew the proposal reached beyond ceremony. It would have allowed Camilla's household to influence who wore the jewels, where they appeared, how they were displayed, and which royal women might receive them later. That power could alter family memory for generations. Yet one item inside the inventory changed the decision completely. A sealed, handwritten instruction attached to the original record. Anne had read it. Camilla had not. Charles had not seen the full meaning of the clause. William had not been told how far the request extended. Anne's refusal was more than loyalty to her grandmother. It was a direct strike against an ambition Camilla had carefully hidden from both men. Anne had stopped the transfer with a single decision. But to understand why that refusal cut so deeply, the private stakes facing both women had to be exposed. To the outside world, the dispute concerned diamonds, pearls, and royal protocol. Inside the family, it concerned belonging. For Camilla, the collection represented acceptance by a dynasty that had once resisted her presence. For Anne, it represented the memory of a grandmother whose standards still shaped the monarchy. Neither woman viewed the jewels as decoration. Each saw them as proof of something deeply personal, and only one of them believed the other had earned the right to protect that legacy. Camilla stood in silence after the refusal reached her. She removed the pearl brooch she had planned to wear that evening and placed it carefully inside its case. The Queen Consort had spent years carrying the weight of public judgment, family suspicion, and constant comparison. She believed stewardship of the collection would finally confirm that she belonged at the highest level. Instead, Anne's decision made her feel temporary again. The Queen turned toward her aide and asked a question she had clearly held inside for years. "How long must I remain a guest in my own family?" The aide offered no answer. Camilla understood why the collection mattered. It was connected to Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, the late royal matriarch whose personal jewelry carried family memory as well as public importance. Controlling it would have meant more than wearing beautiful pieces. It would have meant being trusted with the past. Anne carried a different burden. She remembered private conversations with her grandmother, who had praised discipline, resilience, and service without applause. The princess had been taught that royal possessions were never rewards. They were responsibilities passed from one generation to the next. That lesson had stayed with her, and now it stood between her and Camilla. Zara Tyndall listened, as her mother explained the decision in a quiet conversation. Anne admitted that people would call her cold and cruel. Zara asked whether she had any regret. The princess paused, then said, remaining silent would have betrayed the woman who trusted the family to protect those pieces. Her daughter understood that this was not about dislike, it was about duty. Camilla's request had been supported by a polished presentation, arguing that the collection should be united under the office of the Queen Consort, meaning the household that supports the king's wife in her official duties. The plan promised ceremonial order and easier access. Yet Anne had found something buried inside the proposal. One clause would have allowed Camilla's household to recommend future recipients. That meant she could influence which royal women wore the pieces and who might receive them later. Anne saw that power as dangerous. The refusal may have happened behind a closed door, but the true point of no return had occurred months earlier, beneath the weight of memory and an empty chair. Every royal conflict has a moment that later feels inevitable. This one began during a private anniversary service held in memory of the Queen Mother. The gathering was meant to be quiet, respectful, and limited to the closest members of the family. Yet before the service began, Princess Anne noticed something pinned to Camilla's coat. It was not merely an antique brooch. It was a piece that had been kept away from public use, and Anne instantly understood that someone had crossed a line. Anne stepped closer and studied the rare diamond and sapphire thistle brooch. The private memorial service at the Royal Lodge Chapel, a small family ceremony held away from public attention, was meant to honor the Queen Mother without spectacle. That made the choice even more painful. The jewel had remained sealed because it was linked to her final public appearance in Scotland, a memory that carried deep meaning for both the princess and Charles. The king saw the brooch only moments later. Charles recognized it immediately, but before he could speak, Anne asked the question already burning inside her. Who authorized its release? Camilla held her ground and replied that her household believed the piece was appropriate for the occasion. The Queen Consort spoke calmly, yet she could feel the accusation beneath the silence. Anne refused to create a scene. She took her seat beside Charles and kept her hands tightly clasped throughout the service. The monarch noticed the tension but said nothing. Camilla avoided looking toward either of them, aware that the brooch had changed the mood of a gathering meant to preserve family unity. The truth emerged after the ceremony. Camilla's dresser had obtained the jewel through a temporary ceremonial loan, a short-term permission allowing a royal item to be worn for one approved event. A junior collection officer had signed the release because he believed the Queen Consort already had verbal approval. She had not. Anne acted before the day ended. She privately ordered a full review of every recent access request connected to the Queen Mother's collection. The audit, a formal examination of records and approvals, revealed more than a single mistake. Several informal requests from Camilla's office had involved other brooches, necklaces, and ceremonial pieces tied directly to the late matriarch. Charles read the findings in silence. Camilla insisted the requests were part of normal planning. Anne heard something else. She heard a pattern. When the formal bid for custodial control later arrived, the princess no longer saw administrative reform. She saw confirmation of the ambition first exposed by the unauthorized brooch. The memorial incident had planted the suspicion, but when Anne and Camilla finally met face to face, private resentment became an open royal confrontation. There were no cameras, no waiting courtiers, and no carefully prepared statements when the two women entered the small drawing room at Clarence House. Camilla arrived determined to reverse the decision. Anne arrived carrying the original inventory. Between them stood a low table, a sealed jewelry ledger, and years of unspoken resentment. What followed was not a polite disagreement over royal property. It was a direct challenge over authority, memory, and whether becoming queen had changed the limits of Camilla's power. Camilla had requested the meeting after learning that Anne had not delayed the proposal. She had recommended its permanent rejection. Clarence House, the London residence used by senior royals, suddenly felt less like a home and more like a place of judgment. The queen consort entered expecting negotiation. The princess arrived with the collection inventory and the access review from the memorial incident. She had brought evidence, not sympathy. Camilla spoke first. She said the monarchy trusted her to stand beside Charles, represent the crown, and carry the pressure of being queen, yet privately denied her the tools needed to perform that role. Her voice tightened. She asked how she could be treated as essential in public and unworthy behind closed doors. Anne did not look away. "You were given access," she said. "You mistook it for ownership." Camilla pushed her chair backward. The queen accused the princess of hiding behind family memory to keep her permanently outside the inner circle. Anne remained seated, but her voice hardened. She said, acceptance could not be manufactured through jewels, and the Queen Mother's legacy could not be used to erase old wounds. The princess opened the jewelry ledger, the official record listing each piece, its history, and every approved loan. She pointed to request after request from Camilla's household. These were not general crown jewels, meaning items held for official royal use. They were pieces tied directly to one woman, one family line, and one emotional history. Camilla finally admitted that Charles knew she wanted broader control. Yet she also confessed that the king had never reviewed the final clause concerning future allocation. He knew the ambition, but not its full reach. Anne understood immediately. The monarch's support had been given without complete knowledge. Silence took over. Camilla realized the admission had weakened her position. Anne closed the ledger and said the matter would now go before a family trust panel, a small group responsible for protecting private royal assets. Charles, William, and the collection's guardian would decide where final authority truly rested. The confrontation left both women wounded. But the next battle would not be decided by emotion alone. It would be decided by an old instruction hidden within the collection itself. Power inside the monarchy rarely belongs entirely to the person wearing the crown. Sometimes it rests inside a sealed envelope, protected by signatures made decades earlier. As Charles, William, and Anne gathered to review the disputed collection, the princess placed one final item on the table: a handwritten instruction created before the Queen Mother's death. The room changed the moment Charles recognized the handwriting. Camilla's bid was no longer being judged only by the living. A voice from the past had entered the decision. Charles reached for the letter but did not open it immediately. The collection existed under a private family arrangement, meaning it was controlled by named relatives rather than treated like the crown jewels, which are official treasures held for the monarchy itself. That difference mattered. It gave designated guardians power over loans, inheritance, and long-term protection. Anne was one of those guardians. William represented the future line. The king carried senior authority, but even he could not simply erase the written conditions. Anne watched her brother unfold the page. She knew the handwriting would affect him before the words did. Charles read slowly, reached the final sentence, and placed the instruction down without speaking. The monarch understood the choice now facing him. Supporting Camilla could mean rejecting his grandmother's final safeguard. Supporting Anne could wound his wife in a way no private reassurance could repair. William broke the silence carefully. The prince said Camilla's ceremonial position deserved respect and access when duty required it. But he also warned that marriage into the senior royal line could not automatically create personal control over family property. His words were measured, yet the message was unmistakable. The instruction contained the first barrier Anne had expected. No spouse entering the senior line through marriage could independently control the Queen Mother's personal collection or decide its permanent distribution. The rule had been written to prevent any single household from turning shared history into private territory. Charles read the second condition again. Major pieces had to remain available to blood descendants and future direct heirs. That protected the emotional connection between the jewels and the family members who carried the Queen Mother's line forward. It also meant Camilla's office could borrow, but not command. Anne said nothing more. She had brought the evidence and allowed the dead matriarch's own words to speak. William waited for his father's response, knowing the decision would shape more than one collection. Charles now had three choices: defend Camilla's bid, weaken it, or accept Anne's rejection completely. Whatever he chose would reach beyond that room and into his marriage. The old instruction gave Anne the authority she needed, but Charles's reaction would decide how painfully that authority was enforced. Camilla had entered the morning believing the king would negotiate. By evening, the language of compromise had disappeared. Charles returned from the family trust meeting, carrying no revised proposal, no temporary arrangement, and no promise of reconsideration. He found his wife waiting beside an unopened tea tray. When he finally spoke, the verdict was devastatingly simple. Anne's block would stand. In that moment, Camilla understood that her title had not protected her, and that her husband would not challenge the family safeguard. Charles sat opposite her and explained that he had accepted the Queen Mother's written restriction. The king had also withdrawn his support for Camilla's request for custodial control, meaning the authority to manage, lend, store, and influence the future use of the collection. She could still request approved pieces for official occasions, but every loan would pass through the existing guardians, not through her own household. Camilla reached for the teapot as he spoke. Her hand began to shake before she could pour. She placed it down untouched and looked directly at her husband. "Has Anne now been placed above the Queen?" she asked. The question carried anger, but the hurt beneath it was deeper. Charles answered carefully. He said the decision was not about rank, titles, or public position. It was about respecting a restriction written before either of them had imagined this conflict. Camilla turned away. She told him rank appeared to matter whenever the monarchy needed her to stand beside him, welcome dignitaries, or carry the pressure of royal duty. Yet when she asked to be trusted, her position suddenly seemed powerless. The consequences moved quickly. Camilla's office received instructions to cancel several planned jewelry appearances. One involved the state dinner, a formal banquet held to honor an important visiting leader, where she had expected to debut a diamond necklace, once worn by the Queen Mother. That appearance had already been treated as a symbol of acceptance. A palace aide uncovered how far the preparations had gone. Invitations had been approved, wardrobe notes had been completed, and the necklace had shaped the entire evening's ceremonial plan. Camilla's team had not merely hoped the transfer would succeed, they had behaved as though approval was guaranteed. Anne learned of the cancellations through a documented household briefing. The princess had protected the collection, but she now understood the personal damage left behind. Charles had obeyed the safeguard, yet his marriage had absorbed the blow. Camilla had lost the collection, but the deepest consequence was now unfolding between the king and the sister who had forced him to choose. After the arguments, the ledgers, and the official decisions, Charles asked Anne to meet him alone. No private secretary entered the room. No advisor waited beside the door. For the first time since the dispute began, they spoke not as sovereign and royal guardian, but as brother and sister. Charles looked exhausted. Anne looked unshaken. Yet the silence between them carried the weight of a family divided. One of them had protected the past. The other had to live with the consequences. Charles had called the meeting after Camilla withdrew from a scheduled family dinner. The king understood what that absence meant. This was no longer only a disagreement over custodial control, the authority to manage and protect a private collection. The dispute had entered his marriage, and Anne's decision now carried a cost that could not be measured in jewels. Anne admitted she had always known the refusal would hurt Camilla. The princess did not deny the pain or pretend the decision had been easy, but she told her brother that the Queen Mother's written safeguard could not be ignored simply to preserve peace inside one royal household. Charles listened, yet the strain in his face remained. The king finally asked whether Anne had ever considered how difficult it had been for Camilla to enter rooms filled with memories of women to whom she would always be compared. He reminded his sister that the queen had spent years being judged before she spoke, watched before she acted, and blamed before she could defend herself. Anne's expression softened. She said she understood that burden more than Camilla realized. But sympathy, she warned, could not become permission. Charles walked away, then admitted the mistake he had avoided naming. He should have read the full proposal before supporting it. The truth came next. Charles revealed through their private recorded conversation that Camilla had never told him about the clause allowing her household to influence future recipients. The king had supported broader access, not a permanent shift in family power. Anne's intervention had stopped something he had never knowingly approved. Anne answered with a revelation of her own. She did not want personal control either. The princess proposed a guardianship council, a small group sharing responsibility for the collection, including William and Catherine. No single woman, household, or future spouse would ever be able to claim the jewels as private territory. Charles accepted. He agreed to announce a clear custodial settlement and place the collection under shared protection. Anne's block was no longer a personal victory. It had become a lasting safeguard. The private argument ended with an unexpected compromise. But once the settlement became known, the monarchy's hidden family dispute exploded into public view. By sunrise, the story no longer belonged to the palace. It belonged to breakfast tables, radio studios, crowded station platforms, and millions of people debating what the jewels represented. Some saw Anne as the last guardian of royal duty. Others saw Camilla being punished for a past she could never escape. Yet one newspaper image captured the entire conflict without showing a single diamond. Two royal women on opposite sides of a black line, beneath 4 words that shook the monarchy. The British Chronicle placed split portraits of Princess Anne and Queen Camilla across its front page beneath the headline, "The Princess Said No." The paper turned a private family dispute into a national symbol. Broadcasters soon framed the conflict as a battle between inherited duty and marital authority, meaning the power gained through birth compared with the influence gained through marriage. Suddenly, the public was not only debating jewelry, they were asking who had the right to protect royal history. Anne saw the newspaper during breakfast. The princess read the headline once, folded the page, and placed it beside her plate. An aide asked whether she felt vindicated. She answered immediately. She would not celebrate another woman's humiliation. The decision had been necessary, but Camilla's pain was not a victory. Camilla faced something harsher. The Queen watched a television presenter describe her bid as an attempt to seize control of the Queen Mother's legacy. Her expression tightened. Before the segment ended, she switched off the screen and told her staff that every scheduled engagement would continue unchanged. She refused to disappear while the country judged her. The palace responded before noon. Officials released a short statement confirming that the collection would remain under shared family guardianship, a system in which several named relatives protect and manage important private possessions together. The statement did not mention the confrontation, but it clearly supported Anne's intervention. William, Catherine, and Anne were named as custodial members. Charles retained final review, while Camilla received ceremonial borrowing rights for approved occasions. She could wear selected pieces, but she could not independently control storage, loans, inheritance, or future distribution. The mood slowly changed. Public anger gave way to a deeper understanding that the dispute had created a lasting rule. No spouse, no household, and no single royal figure could claim the collection as personal territory. The headlines had chosen their heroes and villains, but the true verdict would be written in how Anne and Camilla faced each other after everything had been decided. The final moment did not occur during a council meeting or beneath a newspaper headline. It happened at a family reception several days later. Anne entered wearing no historic jewel. Camilla arrived with a simple modern brooch chosen from her own collection. For a few seconds, neither woman moved toward the other. Then Anne crossed the room first. Their exchange was brief, restrained, and impossible to mistake for affection. Yet it revealed the emotional truth of the entire conflict. The decision was final, and both women understood its cost. Anne spoke quietly. She told Camilla that blocking the bid had never been an attempt to deny her place beside Charles. The final settlement placed the Queen Mother's collection under a shared guardianship council, a small group responsible for protecting and managing the jewels together. Anne, William, and Catherine would serve as custodians, while Charles retained limited final oversight. Camilla held her composure. She answered that intention did not erase humiliation, especially after the dispute had become public. Still, the Queen accepted that the written safeguard could not be ignored. She could request approved pieces for major royal occasions, but she could not independently control their storage, lending, inheritance, or future recipients. Camilla then admitted what she had hidden beneath arguments about efficiency and ceremony. She had pursued the collection because she believed caring for it would prove that the family had finally accepted her. The Queen had wanted responsibility, but she had also wanted belonging. Anne listened without interrupting. The princess answered with painful honesty. Acceptance could not be secured through possession, especially when the objects carried another woman's memory. Anne understood Camilla's desire to belong, but she refused to let that need reshape a legacy entrusted to the entire family. Anne then revealed the council's first decision through a documented family account. Every major piece would receive a complete written history, recording the women who wore it, the occasions connected to it, and the meaning it carried across generations. Catherine would eventually oversee the educational archive, a protected record designed to preserve that history. William would ensure the collection remained connected to the direct royal line. Camilla agreed to contribute records from her own ceremonial appearances without seeking ownership. Charles accepted the boundaries. Anne had blocked more than a jewelry request. She had stopped royal memory from becoming personal territory. Camilla lost the authority she wanted, but gained a clearer place under rules that applied to everyone. Charles learned that love could not override guardianship. Anne proved that loyalty sometimes demanded an unpopular refusal. The jewels remained protected. The family accepted the permanent settlement. Nobody received everything they wanted, but the legacy survived intact. The door to the collection closed under shared protection, not personal ownership. And with that final decision, the conflict was over. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.